My name is Tom, and I am an alcoholic. And I live in Oakland, California, and I'm glad to be here. I got to come here last year, and over the years I've had the chance to visit Ogden and Salt Lake, and it's nice to see some familiar faces. I'm not that good on names, but it's nice to see some familiar faces. I'm a little infectious. I was on a plane and I sat next to somebody who had cholera or diphtheria or smallpox. I'm not sure which one, but I've got it. It started yesterday and I just felt doomed and hopeless. I have never seen a germ, but I believe in them. So as a consequence of that, because I make adult decisions, I'm not shaking hands or sneezing on or licking anybody tonight, okay? You don't need that kind of misery. And if you do need that kind of misery, you want to talk to your sponsor about it because it's not a good sign. But I am glad to be here, and I'm on my way to spend the weekend with a group of alcoholics in recovery in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, which is an extraordinary place. There's a lot of dairy farms and a lot of Germans and Polish people, and it's extraordinary, and they think that's normal. And when they're talking about the big city, they mean Milwaukee. And when they need to go sin, they go to Chicago. I mean, it's very interesting how that works. So I'm glad to spend time there, and I'm glad to be here and welcome newcomers and visitors, and thanks for the people that put this together. Elizabeth said that, and Sean said that, but this is service. This is bringing people together, and a lot of us are isolated, cranky people. So to get us together even for short periods of time and no fistfights is a breakthrough. I think we're experiencing a moment of recovery. And I'm glad to be here. Because of the work I do, I get to meet a lot of people. And at the end of my drinking, I wasn't meeting anybody. I'm an isolated drunk. I drank in bars for as long as I could, and I really liked bars. But I got isolated and cranky and unpredictable. And I never knew what my behavior was going to be. And it got me into trouble sometimes. I have a big, fat mouth. And I would occasionally inform people of things that they were reluctant to hear. And I would get argumentative. And I would think I was being funny and amusing, but I was really being a jerk. And in recovery, I try not to be a jerk one day at a time. But it was really easy to fall into that. And I got angrier and more isolated, and it was very hard to be with me, even for me. Alcoholics Anonymous is a funny group of people, and if you're new, it does take a while to figure us out. You know, I've said this before. In fact, I think I said this here last year, but you remember when you say you are. And in the early days, some groups tried to have approval committees, and you had to pass tests or be voted on. We don't do that anymore. You remember when you say you are. And every member of the program owns one share of stock in the program. So we're equal owners and we're equal members. That's radical democracy. This is very grassroots stuff. Bill Wilson, who had many, many gifts and many, many funny places in his life, really believed in grassroots stuff. And so did a whole bunch of the people he associated with. That life existed here, not up there. And so we're going to organize on a grassroots level, which is how the program gets put together. My suspicion is that There are people here tonight from meetings all over the greater Salt Lake area. And that's a wonderful thing. Also, this is true, the highest rank anyone gets in Alcoholics Anonymous is sober. So whether you have 51 years, Mazel Tov, that's just wonderful. Or 11 days, same. And I have heard old-timers talk nonsense, and I have seen newcomers save lives. It's very interesting how that works. We do a lot of speaking and listening in Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's what I've been asked to do tonight, talk a little bit about my story and a couple other things. And I'm happy to do that and share a little bit of what I know. And if I say anything that's helpful, please use it. And if it's not helpful, don't worry about it. I got a call a while ago from a fellow who heard a tape of a talk I did. And he disagreed with something I said. So he tracked me down and left a message and said, "Call me, it's important." So I called him and I got a 35-minute lecture on something he disagreed with. And then it occurred to me that I'm paying for this call. So I wished him well, but we disagree on something, and I turned him over to God's good care and hung up. We do disagree on things, and that's okay. I mean, if I say something tonight that really upsets you, work it out with your sponsor. You don't have to tell me about it. I'm on my way to Wisconsin. Leave me alone. Oh, man. I was working with a group of people, and we were going through the book. I like the literature. I don't like all of the literature, but I like the fact of using the literature. I go to some meetings where we go through the 12 steps and 12 traditions. It's our basic text. And also I've been to meetings recently where we read parts of the big book and we look at stories in the back. And it's getting people together and it's sharing our heritage. It's sharing how we get here. Anyway, I went to this one big book study and we started with the doctor's opinion, which I've read, so why should I read it again? And it said this, and doctor's opinion is Dr. William Silkworth. And William Silkworth was a physician who loved alcoholics. Now, I don't want to shock you, but a lot of physicians don't love alcoholics. Nurses, social workers, parole officers, they really don't like working with us for a couple of reasons. Number one, we lie. And number two, we don't follow directions. And number three, we blame them. So who needs that, But Dr. Silkworth, the commentaries say he developed a love for us and he developed a knack for working with us. Because it takes a certain kind of skill, And he worked with hundreds of alcoholics before he met Bill Wilson. And when he met Bill Wilson, Bill was in desperate shape. He had been admitted to the hospital for the third or fourth time that year. He used to be a prominent guy with a lot of pizzazz and future and promise. And he drank all that away. He was unemployed and unemployable. And his wife paid the bills because she had the job. Bill was a mess. Bill was a train wreck. And he's at Towns Hospital in New York and has this experience that changed his life. Sudden, dramatic. He felt somehow the presence of a power greater than himself. The desire to drink was removed. He wanted to be of service. For the first time in his life, he wanted to be useful, and he had no idea what to do. And Dr. Silkworth came to see him the next morning, and Bill said, "I think I might be going crazy." And Dr. Silkworth said, "We don't know. Let's watch. We'll see." And Bill needed to learn things. He needed to learn things about alcoholism, and he needed to learn things about spirituality. He had no information in that field. He knew money. He knew law. He knew charm, eye for the ladies. But he didn't know anything about alcoholism, and Dr. Silkworth is the one who told him this is an allergy of the body and an obsession of the mind. Dr. Silkworth is also the one who told him abstinence is the answer. You don't relearn to drink once you've crossed that line into alcoholism. And Bill takes that and turns it into 1 day at a time. 1 day at a time, we don't take the first drink. How does the program work? Don't drink today. Yeah, but what about Thanksgiving? It's coming. Well, today we're not drinking. I was trying to explain this to a Spanish Jesuit in Chiang Mai, Thailand. He said, exactly how is it you don't drink? And I said, well, I don't drink today. And there was a moment of silence. And he was thinking Spanish thoughts. And then he said to me, well, what happens when today becomes tomorrow? I said, it's today. And the light bulb went on. He went, oh. Before I discovered that I don't drink today, I tried to not drink for periods of time. I'm not going to drink this month. Or I'm not going to drink this week. And it was a misery. Every day I didn't drink, I didn't feel better, I felt worse. Because in my brain, the way I figure out my life, my next drink is inevitable. And I had a very clear voice in my head that said, Tom, you could put off that next drink for a week. You could put off that next drink for a month. You could put off that next drink for a year. I was 29 when I got sober. You could put off that drink for 10 years. If you don't have a drink for 10 years, you'll be 39 years old. And you're going to live to be 80. No one has stayed sober over 60 years. What makes you think you're going to be the first? And if you're going to be drunk in 60 years, you may as well start today. I'm a logical man. And I found it was just impossible to argue with logic like that. And I would have a beer. I tried measuring drinks for a while. One of my friends, I was at the seminary in Berkeley, and a friend of mine went to a class on alcoholism that was taught at the Pacific School of Religion. I went to school in Berkeley for a seminary, and we had 12 schools and 9 denominations studying together. It was a great place to learn things. So you shared a lot. Every school had its own requirements, but you could take classes anywhere. And there was a class taught by the Pacific School of Religion on alcoholism. Of course, I did not take the class. I don't want to know anything about alcoholism. But one of my earnest little friends did. And he came back and he said, the liver can handle an ounce of alcohol an hour. I found this useful information. So I thought I'd drink a shot of bourbon an hour. And I did it with a shot glass and a watch, kind of drinking and looking and drinking and looking. And I did that for 5 or 6 days, and here's what I learned. I don't want to drink an ounce an hour. It is a misery to drink an ounce an hour. I have some emotional friends from the southern part of Europe, and they would say, don't you ever miss a glass of red wine with a nice Italian meal? And the answer, and I don't want to shock you, I'm not interested in a glass of wine with anything. I don't want to be a social drinker. It seems very depressing to me. It doesn't go anywhere. My middle brother was in Vietnam. He's not an alcoholic, but he's been depressed for years. And Paul came back from Vietnam and I was drinking, and I said, Paul, can I fix you another drink? And he said, oh, no, thanks, I'm starting to feel it. And I remember sitting him down saying, Paul, the point is to feel it. We get on the horse to ride. Mm-hmm. So when alcohol, which had been my best friend, became my worst enemy, I had no idea what to do. That happened over a period of time. One of our old-timers who just passed this past summer, Dr. Gil Ayat. Gil's from French Canada. And Gil died. He was 93 years old. He got sober when Eisenhower was president. You young people can look that up. And that was 1959, 1960. He got sober right at the end of the Eisenhower years. And then he relapsed under Mr. Kennedy and got sober again with Lyndon Johnson somewhere in the middle of 1965. And so Gil was a physician, and he was from French Canada. And when he was a little boy, prohibition was going on in the United States. So any American who wanted a drink had to go to Canada if they lived up north. And Gil lived just on the other side of the border across from Detroit. And when he was a little boy, he'd see all of these happy, funny, enjoyable Americans pour across the border, get falling down drunk, and go back to the United States. And he said to himself, those people know how to live, and I'm going to get to the United States as soon as I can. They didn't explain to him prohibition, you know. Anyway, Gil ends up in San Francisco, does lots of things. His alcoholism progresses, and he ends up sober. I asked him, we became friends over the years. I asked him, Gil, what did you like best about AA when you first started going? He had a French accent, and his English was eloquent. I mean, he could be as eloquent as Churchill. You know, just with the way he used words. I loved hearing him talk. Anyway, I said, Gil, what did you like at your first meeting? He said, well, I sat down. They read something. Then they said, let's take a moment of silence to do with as you wish, and follow that with the serenity prayer. He said, what I really like was that moment of silence to do with as you wish. He said, it let me know that there was room here. There was not, you better all do it my way or you'll die. To do with as you wish. So, Gil, at the end, he was blind with macular degeneration and pretty deaf. He could hear a little bit out of one ear. You kind of had to shout, hey, Gil, how are you? And then get him to talk. And he was very sharp. And I wanted him to come to my home group meeting in Oakland because he's not going to be here forever. And he was still very personable and very healthy, except for his vision and his hearing. So we got him to come over and speak. And at my home group meeting, it's like 40 people, 50 people in a small room. And there's a whole bunch of young people who are coming there. I don't know how that happened. And there's a bunch of rather attractive young ladies that come to the meeting. And so there's also a bunch of galoots who come to the meeting. Perhaps you have that in Salt Lake also, I'm not sure. But these galoots are there. So I decided the young, perky persons need to hear Gil. So we got him over. And Gil stood up, Dr. Gil, and he said, I'm blind, I can't see you, I hope I'm facing the right way. And I'm deaf, so I hope I'm not shouting or speaking too softly. And then he said, my name is Gil, and I'm a recovering gynecologist. And of course, people loved him instantly, and he talked about what it was like and what happened and what it like. It was just wonderful. Anyway, I sat at Gil's feet for a long time. And I heard him give a talk about alcoholism. And, we have our own little phrases and code words. But Gil would talk about alcoholism to people who weren't in our tight little club. And he would give basics, real basic stuff. He mentioned allergy of the body, obsession of the mind. He talked about symptoms, blackouts. I had a lot of those. He talked about mood changes, those personality shifts. I had a lot of those. He talked about tolerance. My tolerance became nothing. He talked about all those symptoms of alcoholism and that it was a chronic and progressive disease and it kills people. Then he took questions. And this lady raised her hand and she said, Dr. Gill, is it really a disease? Now, he'd spent the last 40 minutes talking about it being a disease, but she had a question, And he said, yes, symptoms, progression, death, disease. And she said, well, there are early symptoms of alcoholism. And Gill said, yeah. She said, well, if someone's showing early signs of alcoholism, can't you sit them down and say, listen, you're showing early signs of alcoholism, knock it off. Say, wouldn't that work? And Gil said, the reason that won't work is alcoholism is a disease that has 3 distinct phases to it. Phase number 1 is the fun phase. This is when it's fun. And early alcoholism, you have a pretty good time. And if you sit someone down and say, you think you're having a good time, but we think you're an alcoholic, please stop. The response is, listen, I'm having a good time. If I ever get to be as bad as you, I'll stop. Phase 1, fun. I was an awkward kid. I'm bright. I never played sports. I liked reading books. I liked a lot of things that seemed odd and isolated to me. And when I was 14, 15, 16 years old, when I drank, the whole world got a lot better. I developed confidence and self-confidence and self-esteem and testosterone and focus and energy and grace. I liked it. I could talk to people. I could move. It was a wonderful experience. My early years of drinking were fun. And I mentioned that at a meeting once, and someone said, oh, don't say that. You'll trigger newcomers. So I guess they think we should lie to the newcomers, Don't tell them the truth. My suspicion is if the newcomers were still having fun, they wouldn't be here. And I would also like to say this. If I could still have fun, I wouldn't be here either. I didn't suddenly say, oh, I want a more evolved lifestyle, Fun. Stage 2 alcoholism is called fun plus problems. It's still fun, but you start to have problems. Problems at home, problems at work, problems at school, problems with health, problems. And then stage 3 alcoholism is just called problems. The good times are gone. The first step, powerless and unmanageable, we admitted we were powerless. What it's really doing is asking, are you still having any fun? And if you are, it's hard to hang out with people like us. I mean, to find us interesting and attractive, you have to be a pretty damaged person. I just want you to know that. Nice, healthy people don't hope they'll grow up and join Alcoholics Anonymous. And here's some falling down drunk in Salt Lake City on a Wednesday night talk about whatever he's talking about. I mean, ordinary folks don't really don't want to hang out with the likes of us, trust me. Oh, my. Even more so in Al-Anon. I mean, to find Al-Anon life-saving, you have to be very desperate. You know? I was talking to a friend of mine who has been sober 7 years. I've been an Al-Anon member forever, and I joined Al-Anon because I was exhausted and enraged. And I did not want to be a sober person who was shooting people, but that's a whole other conversation and a whole other story. Anyway, I just mentioned Al-Anon. So this my friend came up and she said, I'm 7 years sober, and I'm pretty miserable, but I don't yet know if I'm miserable enough for Al-Anon. And I said, you just hold out as long as you can. You know. You will find them like an oasis in the desert, and you will love them, but you have to be worse than you are now. So you just go for it. I mean, people who are drowning will take any life raft offered. And that's how a lot of us get here. Oh, I can't go to meetings. People like that are there. Really? This group's too old. Oh, that's good. Too many kids. Oh, that's good. You must be having luxurious alcoholism. You get to pick and choose, do you? A lot of us are just, oh, no, I don't want that life preserver. It's blue. I'd like one that's green. Well, you've got the blue one. I was at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I heard someone also talk about alcoholism, fun plus problems. But the image this person used was that alcoholism is a lot like dancing with a gorilla. You're not done dancing until the gorilla is done dancing. Which is an important image to think about a little bit. Because I admit it, the gorilla's cute, you laugh like you haven't laughed in years, and they are wonderful dancers. But once the gorilla gets his arms around you, the gorilla's in charge. And you will do things you never thought you'd do, because the gorilla's making the decisions. You want to sit down. If the gorilla doesn't want to sit, you don't sit. If the gorilla wants to tango, even though you don't know how to tango, you'll tango. And the gorilla kills a lot of us. I started noticing that right around the time I was 10 years clean and sober. A lot of people who used to be here weren't here anymore. Overdoses, suicides, ran away from home, last seen somewhere over there. Whew. If you're clean and sober today, it's a pretty good sign the gorilla has let go. If the gorilla has let go, get out of the cage. And don't go back into the cage, even when the gorilla promises to dance nice. You know? Oh, I'll just go out for one more weekend. Gorilla promised we'd get along. Casualty rates are so high. People who love us visit the zoo a lot. And they walk by the giraffes. I'm pro-giraffe myself, but they walk by the giraffes and the zebras. And then they get to the gorilla cage, and they see the person they love dancing with the gorilla, and they go nuts. It might be their mom or their dad, or their husband or wife, or their brother or sister, or one of their kids or their best friend. But they become full of fear and anxiety, and they want to break into the cage and save you from the gorilla. But you're busy dancing, so they don't know what to do. So while they're waiting for you to stop, they vacuum the cage. And they hang curtains in the cage. And they prepare nice, nourishing meals, with a lot of tofu and avocado. I'm sure this is going to be great. And then if you're still dancing with the gorilla, they try to get between you and the gorilla and separate you, and the gorilla turns on them and yanks their arms and legs off. The casualty rates among people who love us is pretty high too. So they have a program. And it's called Al-Anon. And a lot of Al-Anon comes down to this. Stay out of the cage. But I need to vacuum. We know. But stay out of the cage. We're meeting over here with the giraffes, and we'll be happy to have a conversation with you. And you can have all your feelings over with the giraffes, who by and large are a friendlier bunch than the gorillas. Oh, man. The steps get put together. Steps 1, 2, and 3. I guess I did those a lot. I want to talk a little bit tonight about step 4 and step 5. I mean, once you're here and you realize that you're glad to be here. It took a while for me to be glad to be here. I didn't like everybody I met at meetings. Some people do. My sponsor claims that he has never been to a bad AA meeting, and I suggest that he travel with me sometimes, because there are some bad meetings out there. Steps 1, 2, 3. I went to meetings because I was desperate. And I went to meetings because I didn't know what else to do. And I went to meetings because a lot of people were friendly. And I went to meetings because people talked about real things. And I went to meetings because sometimes we laughed really hard. And I went to meetings because there were some extraordinary folks there. But if you like everybody you've met so far in Alcoholics Anonymous, you haven't been to that many meetings. I got sober in 1976. I was intervened on by members of my community. I'm a lucky guy in lots of ways. In the 1960s and 70s, in a lot of Roman Catholic religious communities of men, the leadership was taught about alcoholism. The National Council on Alcoholism, they learned it was a disease, it was a treatable disease. If someone's showing symptoms, get them into treatment. So they were ready. When I surfaced, they knew that I was not a bad guy, I was a sick guy. And I got intervened on and put into a 21-day program. This was so long ago that it cost $1,000 a week, and we thought that was a lot. And insurance was awfully nervous about paying for alcoholism because we keep going back and drinking and relapsing and stuff. So they couldn't put alcoholism on the insurance form. Instead, they put chronic, non-organic brain syndrome. He thinks bad all the time. That's what... And I started going to meetings. And what I found at meetings, it just wasn't friendly people, because not everyone's friendly. At meetings, I could breathe. I'm a little high-strung, and I was very, very tense. And I had no skin covering my nerve endings. And I was frantic and isolated and mood swings galore. At a meeting, I could breathe. So I went to a lot of meetings. I don't know if anyone said go to 90 meetings in 90 days. I didn't hear that. I went to a lot of meetings. We have a fellow where I live who said that we do newcomers a great disservice when we tell them to go to 90 meetings in 90 days, because you come to the 91st day and you wonder what to do next. So you say, what do I do now? And you say, well, go to 90 more meetings for the next 90 days. And the newcomer might feel a little jerked around. It might be cleaner if we just said, listen, amigo, we'd like you to go to 10,000 meetings in the next 4 years. So you don't have to wonder about what about New Year's Eve or Thanksgiving. We'll be at a meeting. Nice to see you. The way I've heard that talked about in various parts of the country, the sponsor would just say, get in the car. Get in the car, and you're going to a meeting. And I find meetings help. Meetings take the edge off for me. I was at my home group meeting last night, and it was really helpful. I was able to listen. I was glad to see a lot of the people who were there. A fellow I've known forever took we don't give cakes or chips, or we just say any birthdays this week. And one of my pals was celebrating 25 years. And I went up to him and I said, that's a good start. And I said, now, 25 is an accomplishment. I mean, it really is. But now, what you look forward to, and we do this a day at a time, but what you look forward to is 10,000 days. And 10,000 days is right around 27 years and 3 months. And my sponsor turned 10,000 days sober on his 60th birthday. And he thought that was deeply significant. And I just thought it was weird. So I got sober, I'm intervened on, I'm put into treatment, and I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to do it your way. My sponsor says it is a very good sign if you're desperate enough to be willing to get well someone else's way. Because by the time I get here, all of my ways didn't work. I like reading about it, I like thinking about it, and I like doing it by myself. And I had to somehow get involved in the group and get phone numbers and a sponsor and get into all the AA ritual, of going to meetings and reading things and going to meetings and reading things. And this was in 1976, bicentennial year. I remember the bicentennial. I was drinking. The great ships were coming into New York Harbor July 4th, 1976. And it was a big thing, and it was on TV, and everyone was so excited. And I was with 2 friends of mine, both of them are priests, but neither one is an alcoholic, so they're dull as donuts. And I was hoping to be drunk for the entire day, and instead they brought out food. Well, I was raised to be polite, and so I was polite, and we watched those stupid ships. And then I went out and started drinking, and I'm kind of in a gray place until about the 18th of August. Although in that gray place, I was also drunk in New York and drunk in Seattle, and I could tell you how I got there, because I looked it up. It takes a while to recover from alcoholism. If you've been dancing with the gorilla a long time, or if you have been dancing with a particularly nasty gorilla for even a short time, it takes a while to recover. Healing takes time, and a lot of recovery is about healing. I like depressants. I like to be shut down. I prefer to feel nothing. So I drank on a daily basis. I'm a falling down drunk, and I smoked a little non-habit forming marijuana every day for 7 to 10 years. I saw a doctor to get a Valium prescription because I thought it would help. And friends of mine I had a lot of anxiety and mood swings. I had friends who were doing better on Valium. So I saw Dr. Arthur Solomon, who was a psychologist at Kaiser Hospital in San Francisco. And I saw him for a couple of weeks, maybe a month or two. And then I said, Dr. Solomon, can I get a Valium prescription from you? And he said, no. And I did not know they could do that. My friends had doctors who liked giving them Valium prescriptions. And the reason I want to mention it is just so that we all hear that some therapists are competent. Some aren't. So I asked Dr. Solomon, I said, why won't you give me a Valium prescription? He said, because you'd abuse it. And I said, exactly. I'm looking forward to abusing it. And if I could use enough Valium, my drinking would be less erratic. So I have taken Valium. I've stolen it from friends. I don't even think that's worth mentioning. A dozen or so times. And one of the reasons I did not like Valium was it took 20 minutes. And who has that kind of time? You know? What I liked about alcohol is it worked instantly. I was teaching in Los Angeles. It was an awful day. There was no air. It was the middle of town. The kids were just hideous. And the other teachers were just fools. And the administration was composed of nothing but swine. And I was embattled. It was hot. There was no air. I felt squeezed. I felt oppressed. I felt attacked. It was an awful day. And I went and 5 o'clock drinks, and I got a water glass and filled it with a little ice, gin, and I just sucked it down like oxygen, and I felt instantly better. So we do it again, if bang, bang, and then I can nurse the third and the evening has begun, So I was at this meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I went to a young people's meeting. And what I like doing sometimes is because I'm arrogant. I like saying to young persons, I got sober before you were born. I love saying that. Then they never call on me, but I'm there, the old graybeard guy. When I got sober, my beard was red. And this young woman was talking, and she said, I was telling my friend, AA's not like heroin. It doesn't work right away. And this goes back on that little thing I wanted to mention about healing takes time. It takes time. And when I was in treatment, they said, your hormone level will get back to normal in 6 to 9 months. I said, hormone level? And I'm not taking depressants. I'm not taking depressants. So that means my emotions start coming up. And when my emotional world appeared, I had to learn a whole new vocabulary. I had to learn a whole new language. I prefer numb. How are you? Fine. Been fine for years. But suddenly it was feelings of panic and anger and exhaustion and rage and then nasty humor, all mixed up. The emotions were all red and black. And I was starting to feel. I was starting to come out of the fog. I was starting to defrost. And I thought I was losing my mind because I was having emotions. And this was very complicated. It took a long time. I went to see a therapist. I've seen more than one therapist. The anger stuff was up. I had a lot of work to do. Some real basic fundamental work of growing up. And I think a lot of what the steps enable us to do is grow up. This is about becoming emotional and psychological and spiritual adults rather than children throwing tantrums. And fourth step, fifth step. I was asked, as I was in all these emotions, to do some writing. And what was bothering me most for a long time, I had some shame about some things, but what was bothering me most was all the anger and all the resentment is the language Bill Wilson used. And so I started making a list of all kinds of people I resented. And I heard someone at a meeting say, if you don't get rid of the resentments, you'll drink again. And I was 6 or 8 months sober, and what I was aware of was that I was nothing but resentments. You know who I am? Let me tell you who I hate and why. That's who I am. And I had a moment of fear, that if I let go of all my resentments, there'd be nothing left. And that took a while. And slowly, life has gotten better. Early recovery, I had a lot of problems. And then some fun started happening along with problems. And now a lot of life is pretty good. It's hard. I think things are difficult. I don't think life is easy. God baffles me on a regular basis, and I don't get the joke regularly. And I wonder why about a lot of stuff. But what the program has given me are some tools to use to work with that stuff, taking an inventory and sharing it with somebody. And it's given me a community of women and men to talk to. We also have traditions. I want to mention it real quickly, traditions. I know I'm going long. And then I want to say something about the concepts, and then I'm done. You can all go home. I don't know whether you noticed it, but we just had an election. And it's the 10th tradition says that we in Alcoholics Anonymous, we do not take any position on outside controversial issues. And it mentions 3. Alcohol reform. Prohibition was still a big deal for most of these folks. This is the 1930s, 1940s. Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob were at their alcoholic bottoms during Prohibition. I like that little detail. So they were violating the Constitution with every drink. Alcohol reform, we're not going to talk about that. It is not an AA topic to be wet or dry, to use the language of the time. What should we talk at a meeting what the legal drinking age should be? That's not an AA topic. What about this thing relating with alcohol? Those aren't AA topics. We're not going to get involved in the argument. Individuals may have opinions, but they can't express them in any way as to implicate AA. We're not going to fight that fight. Alcohol reform. Sectarian religion. A lot of us have religious stuff. A lot of us don't have religious stuff. It's a big deal for a lot of us, pro or con, and we don't share it in common. So we don't talk about that at meetings. It's kind of stressful if someone converts, and wants to bring the whole group along with them. You just have to wish them well and tell them to shut up and sit down. Because it's an outside controversial issue. Also, if someone is religion bashing, that's outside stuff. And if you have a resentment against the church of your childhood, it will get you just as drunk as the resentment against your mother-in-law. And you can't get rid of resentments if you resent abstractions. You have to deal with real things and real people. What happened? Why are you so angry? Well, there was this priest who, or there was a bishop who, or there was a teacher who. Then you can deal with the resentment. But to say, I resent the church, you're going to stay frozen in that for the rest of your life. So religious stuff, just keep it. Politics, alcohol reform, sectarian religion, and politics. We don't agree on anything. Now, I've had this experience. I have fallen very much in love and very much in like with some people in meetings before I knew who they voted for. And then I had a challenge, And in fact, my sponsor, I asked him to be my sponsor before I knew what his politics were. I didn't even know what he drove when I asked him to be my sponsor. So it's. I was in Poland in the early 1980s. Sober. Did some work in Scandinavia. Got 10 days in Poland or so. And I ended up at a sober people that was kind of the underground. The communists were still running the country, and we went underground. And my friend Jim, who's a hopeless alcoholic and a psychologist, we got off the train in Warsaw, and there were 4 Polish guys with an English-Polish dictionary waiting for us. They were told to look for the 2 sober Americans on the train. Hi. So we stayed with these guys. They put us up. They brought us in. It was a wonderful experience. And there is AA all over Poland. But at this time, AA got going because a Polish guy got sober in the States and wrote a letter back home. And there's a lot of alcoholism in Poland. So they wanted to pass the letter around, and somehow there was a big shot in the Communist Party who read the letter and said, this is great. It talked about 12 steps in the fellowship and how this works and turning it over and telling the truth. And so they took this letter and edited it a little bit, and then they published it in the Communist Party monthly magazine, which went to all the hotshots. And they listed some phone numbers and names, anonymously though, you know. I met a woman in Al-Anon, and I said, what's your name? And she said, do you want my real name or my Al-Anon name? I said, what's that about? She said, well, this is a police state, and any organization has to be registered with the police, so we make up names, but we're registered. But my real name is Anna. Interesting. So the man I was staying with and his family, his name was Adam, and Adam had been a very active member of Solidarity, if you remember way back when. And the government of General Jaruzelski had a crackdown, and a lot of these Solidarity guys went to jail, and they spent time in prison, and they were away from their lovers and their moms and their kids, their wives. So Adam's name is listed with the phone number, and all these people read it, and about 3 weeks later, a month later, he gets a phone call from a high-ranking member of the government who said, I'm an alcoholic, I can't stop drinking, I've read your article, will someone please come and talk to me, I need help. And so Adam made a 12-step call and found that he was making a 12-step call on the man who sent him to prison. And one of the things he was taught was, outside political things, stay outside. So he was that man's sponsor. You know? Now, if that can work there, it can work here. But we have to change the way we think. You know? Primary purpose. Women and men coming in out of the storm, all out of a shipwreck. Where is their safety? A lot of recovery is finding safe places and safe people. And meetings have to be safe places full of safe people. So any of us who want help can get help. So traditions need to be observed. The 12th concept says, and there's 12 concepts. This is the last one. The conference, them, shall observe the spirit of AA tradition, taking care that it never becomes the seat of perilous wealth or power. So the folks in New York are never going to become an empire. They don't want perilous wealth or power. The history of my own church over the last 2,000 years is when it's at its craziest, it is toxic with perilous wealth and power. It makes everybody nuts. AA doesn't want to go there. That sufficient operating funds and reserve be its prudent financial principle. Sufficient operating funds and a reserve. Maybe a month's expenses, 2 months' expenses. How much do you need? I was at an AA meeting once in some awful place, and they were talking about buying another $10,000 treasury bill. And someone said, well, don't you contribute anything to New York? And they said, why would we do that? Then money disappears, of course, and people end up in Rio. That it placed none of its members in a position of unqualified authority over others. None of our members are in a position of unqualified authority over others. That's how Stalin ran Russia. Unqualified authority over a lot of other people's lives. We don't do that here. We're equal owners and equal members. That AA reach all important decisions by discussion, vote, and wherever possible, by substantial unanimity. We want to talk about a lot of things when we make decisions. That's why we have conferences and GSR things and conferences and people. We like the discussion. It's the grassroots. That's where it lives. It doesn't come from the top down. And that its actions, and that its actions never be personally punitive. We don't punish people for being jerks. If you do, you end up like a jerk. You know? Its actions never be personally punitive, nor an incentive to public controversy. We want to stay out of all those fights. Even when there's a book published that says, AA is full of jerks, we don't fight that. Because it makes us crazy. And that AA never perform acts of government. And that like the society it serves, the conference will remain always democratic in thought and action. Equal members, equal votes, participation, rotating leadership. We're in this together as equals, and that's what saves lives. We don't want to use North Korea or Stalin's Russia as a role model. I have been to meetings where they were the role model, and they don't usually last. They usually end up in the jungle drinking Kool-Aid. So, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. Enjoy your life. It's good to be here. And it's good to be in a room with our peers, each one a little odder than the next. And whenever I'm in a room full of desperate women and men, I relax immediately because it helps. Thanks a lot.